Hello, I'm Debbie Martin and I research and teach Latin American film here at University College London in the School of European Languages and Cultures. If your parents didn't go to university, considering applying for a degree might feel daunting. We asked 3 of our current students and 3 members of staff who teach on our programmes about their experiences of being first-generation university students.
My mum was from a very rural, very modest rural background, somewhere in central France. There was an expectation in that region and in the family that for modest families in particular, women should leave school and go to work to support their parents as soon as possible. And I would even say that the expectations for black students were even lower. So I wasn't expected to really do anything after the baccalaureate, but I wanted to study. For me, education was the only way I could move out of this feeling of uncertainty and, you know, like many other people, make a better life for myself than the one that my parents had.
I loved languages from a very young age, any language learning, and so having studied Spanish at school, I thought education is the way for me to develop further this passion.
There wasn't a massive expectation for me to go to university, but my mum often said, you can do what you want to do. There shouldn't be anything in the way that stops you from going to university. And that was certainly my biggest motivator to work hard at school and get into the university that I wanted to go to.
I did always have that internal drive. It was like an ambition from early on, that it was like the dream, you know, like I always really wanted to go to university, despite the fact that I knew it was challenging and perhaps I didn't really know many people like me that went to university, and not many people around me kind of like on my estate, or, you know, other people that I know hadn't really always taken that route, but it was kind of like the secret dream. For a long time.
I had a really good teacher at the school I was at. It wasn't a particularly good school, but I had a really great English literature teacher. She was called Julia Wilde, Miss Wilde, we would have called her at the time. And she taught me about university. She told me about university, and she told me that I had the ability to go to university. She was really passionate about a subject, and I went on to study English literature, though I no longer study English literature, but I did, and it was partly because of her interests and for sparking at my own interests and for, you know, in a sense, offering a kind of alternative to the life that one might lead. Right? My family were in the building trade, for example. And this was a different alternative. It was a different world, you know, of books and ideas and of this institution that I learned about, that you could go and just read and think. So I worked towards that. I literally worked towards my A-levels thinking, okay, so I know I need to get these grades to be able to go to that place. And so I worked to do that. And it seemed like, to me, like escape, right? If I could get those grades, which weren't that difficult, it was like a whole new world that you could just escape to and reinvent yourself through. That was really exciting.
Being in business school in France was extremely challenging. On the one hand, it was very exciting because it was considered to be the kind of education that would give you a certain job security, but in a different way, I felt completely out of place. Not only in terms of social class, because most of my peers came from families who were more affluent and who seemed better educated, more articulate, better connected, above all, than I was. And also because it was a very white environment. So I couldn't ever really find space to discuss my identity, the fact that I'd grown up partly in West Africa. No one was really interested in that or could relate to that. And I really felt a little bit like an alien there.
The biggest challenge was just my background in general. I'm from a free school meals. I'm a free school meal student, so I got free lunches throughout my school life because my mum was single, low income family and everything. So that was one of the main issues, finance. The second main issue is this accent. This isn't, I try and play it down a little bit, especially when I'm in London. But in my first week, especially in Freshers Week, I used to meet a lot of people, as you do, and they didn't understand me very well, even the British people.
What it meant to be in a university lecture hall, what it would be to be in a university seminar group, I felt that was a real change that I wasn't quite prepared for, and was probably one of the biggest difficulties about being a first generation, sort of first in my family to go to university, because that was quite a culture shock. When I went, I thought everyone would be cleverer than me. That impression sort of heightened when I was there, because I was I was in classes and lectures with a lot of students who had been to independent schools and had that confidence that comes with being in small groups, or you've been in a debating society and you can handle yourself with an apparent ease and confidence that I really didn't have. I've subsequently learned that that's a performance, but that skill I didn't have until I think my final year, and I think that confidence came from having had a year abroad.
Arriving at university, there's so many. It's so diverse, and I think at first that was a bit of a shock to kind of overcome, dealing with like so many different groups, people from different backgrounds, people from different countries. There's so many different teachers, like even just the environment is so big, it can feel quite scary. And I think I felt a lot of, maybe this isn't really like the right place for me. And at the beginning I was quite worried about, like speaking. I was worried about if I didn't speak or sound the right way. So I think I would hold back quite a lot of the time in class in my first year. Even if I had an interesting contribution, I think I just undervalued it myself rather than anyone else doing that. It was me who was kind of being the biggest limitation. And I suppose I was worried about whether I'd be able to fit in and make friends and find people who had kind of similar experiences and interests, considering that we were from such different backgrounds. But I was pleasantly surprised that kind of like your differences become your biggest strengths, and it kind of brings everyone together. It's really nice to feel like you're never meeting like two of the same people. Everyone has such different and unique like journeys to university and stories. So that's probably been one of my favourite things in hindsight about university.
Having grown up in a working class environment where there weren't books and nobody went to do exams, so all of my family left school before they took exams because you were allowed to in those days. I felt that my education was really narrow, really precise. I'd read the books that you had to read to do English at GCSE and A level, but I wasn't widely read. And I felt like that a sort of, I guess what's sometimes called cultural capital, that sense of a kind of background of knowledge and an understanding of the world. I felt like I had none of that. I was sort of like a kind of quite alien in a sense, and I felt really quite blinkered and like, oh my God, this is like enormously difficult to understand all of these things and learn these things. So that was a real challenge. And that real sense of, slight kind of arrogant 18-year-old, I've done really well in my exams, I'm really clever. Oh my God, I'm not really clever. Actually, there's a whole, bandwidth of knowledge and understanding that I have no conception of. That I found sort of challenging, kind of, in a way, I think sometimes really good challenging, in the sense that I think one of the best things that I learned at university was you are not very clever and you should work hard to learn more.
For young people applying to university and being in doubt as to whether this was the right place for them, I would say UCL is absolutely the right place for them. In fact, that's probably the place where I've felt most at home. And I would say be confident in the value of your ideas, and even if you feel different perspectives are valuable. Different perspectives are great. Don't be put off by the sense that you are not as articulate or as well read as some of your peers, your perspective and your ideas are still valuable. And it took me years to get to a point where I could be confident. I still feel sometimes that I'm less articulate than some of my peers, but I've realized that there is value in having a different lived experience, having a different perspective, and that the way in which we formulate our ideas is not the end of it.
So my first bit of advice that I would give to a first generation student who perhaps wanted to go to university or wanted to apply to university, it sounds so easy, but it is to just apply. I would not, again, it sounds very simple, but I would not be at UCL if I didn't apply. As you start to meet people from different backgrounds, it becomes so much easier for you to get through your journey at university. So I'd definitely say be as open-minded as possible. Yeah, closed-mindedness just doesn't work at university, no matter whether you're really, really rich or really, really poor. You just can't be closed-minded. You just meet everybody, and you make amazing friends from it.
When you get a place to study a subject at university, it's not just about that subject and that programme, but you're part of a broader community of students on that programme, around the university, all the activities that go on at university, student societies, and about the place itself. And that may be a new place for you, or it may be a part of a place that you don't know very well if you're already from London. So I'd reassure you that there are places for you at university. A second piece of advice I give is about the experience I had, goes back to that experience I had where I felt inhibited about speaking in seminars. To that I'd say, ask questions, express your views in seminars. They're as valid as everyone else's. The idea that everyone knows everything in seminars is something I come across a lot with my own students, and no one knows everything, not even your tutor. But we do want to hear your views and hear your questions, so please do ask them.
My biggest advice would be brave. Definitely believe in your kind of ability to do, and remember that it isn't any kind of act of charity, you being here. It is something that you've earned and that you deserve, and that their place here is just as valuable as anyone else's. So I definitely cheer them on.
Try to push yourself to learn things that you don't know. Push yourself to be interested in things that you weren't necessarily interested in before. Be curious and see where that curiosity takes you, because the more you learn about things, the more interesting they become often. So it's grasping that opportunity without being nervous of, oh, I'm going to look stupid, I'm going to look foolish, these people are much cleverer than I probably haven't got anything to offer to these things. So sort of unwind that and just jump in and try and learn and try and be curious and be interested with the people around you. And in that respect, it was the greatest mind-expanding experience that you could go to university. I mean, obviously, I loved it so much that I never left university, right? So that sense that you can continually learn and that you can gain from other people's knowledge. Likewise, if I'm sitting next to someone in the class from Colombia or Afghanistan or China, for example, then I can learn, and you can learn as a student an enormous amount from people who have had really different experiences, and I find that to be endlessly fascinating. That's really why I do what I do, because it just gives me a chance to be curious about things.
Being from a non-academic background, I almost felt like I had more of a confidence to use my right to go and ask my teacher, oh, I need a bit of help with this this writing task. Could you give me any advice? And when my teacher would give me a slot to come and visit them in their office, and you could have that one-on-one with your teachers, which I really benefited from throughout my degree. By bringing a perspective of like bringing a non-academic perspective into an academic location, you're bridging the divide between the non-academic and the academic, and that is probably one of the most important tasks, I believe, of the present day, and something that needs to keep on happening for like the bettering of society.
We hope listening to our staff and students has inspired you to consider applying to study with us here at SELCS. But we know that you probably have more questions, so please check out the links accompanying this video for information you might find useful if you don't have a family background of higher education.